Hello everybody, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and today I am going to bring you a slightly different video to what I usually do. Now you're probably thinking, Josh, you've put out a bunch of Doctor Who videos lately, and yes, that is true, but this is going to be something completely different. Today I'm going to be looking at the best Fifth Doctor stories you have never seen. So what does that title mean? In Doctor Who's illustrious history, over 1,000 episodes have been made now. And with that amount of time and that amount of history in the show, there must be some episodes that have fell through the cracks, right? You'd be right. And some of these stories have been made into books, audio adventures, or have been left by the wayside completely. And today, I'd love to shed some light on some stories that you may have never heard of before. Now, I thought I'd start with Fifth Doctor's era for one simple reason. His era is considered to be one of the most turbulent times in the show's history. Not only because they got a new showrunner in John Nathan Turner the previous year, not only because they were starting out with a new script editor in Eric Saywood, but also because they'd lost the show's possibly most iconic leading actor in Tom Baker. You add into this a massive influx of companions, and you had a lot of scripts that were proposed with different companions, different story dynamics, and quite simply put, different budget expectations. So the stories I'm looking at today, for one reason or another, were rejected by the BBC production office. Some were remade into audio adventures and some were not. So I'm going to start talking about some of the stories in the Fifth Doctor era that didn't make it. It's interesting to note that a lot of these are from the first season by the looks of it, submitted around 1981-82, which probably has a lot to do with the change of script editors. And the first story I'd like to talk about today goes under many names, but was originally meant to be the Fifth Doctor's first episode. Going under many different proposed names, this episode was commonly known as Project Zeta Sigma, but could also be known as Project 4G, which would have been very interesting looking back. Being penned by the writers of the 1980 serial Meglos, Andrew McCullough and John Flanagan were set to write this script, which would have seen the return of the Master, but it would not have been like Castrovalva. This story was to be set around nuclear disarmament. It would have taken place in what is described as a Cold War alien environment. Unfortunately, not a lot of story elements are known about this, other than what I've already discussed, but we do know that it wouldn't have taken place directly after Legopolis, as they would have already escaped from the radio tower. Now, as I previously said, at this time Doctor Who was in quite a lot of turmoil behind the scenes. There was a lot of changes going on to their production staff, especially their writers. It's really hard to place blame or credit to this particular cancellation because so many people were involved with the writing and producing at this point. You had Barry Letts, who was returning to help John Nathan Turner out. You had John Nathan Turner himself, you had Anthony Root as the new script editor, you had Christopher Bidmead as the outgoing script editor, and you had Eric Saywood taking over mid-season. So there were a lot of people who had their hand in this story particularly, but the blame, as far as I can read, goes to Anthony Root, saying that the script was unfeasible. Now, seeing this particular topic handled in Doctor Who would have been really cool, especially with the setting, if they had the budget for it. But obviously, 1981-82 Doctor Who didn't have an awful lot of budget. Now, no novelisations or audio adventures have been made of this story, but we do know that it was replaced by Castrovalva at a very late time. So late, in fact, that they had to actually record the episode Castrovalva towards the end of the season 19 block. So if you think about it, you left it very late to make your opening story of the season, but not only that, the first story without Tom Baker in nearly a decade. That's madness to me. And whilst Castrovalva certainly is decent, especially the starting of it, it is not remembered very well by anybody, really. It's quite a forgettable story, you know? Would this have been any better? Perhaps. The concept was definitely more interesting and could have been very well done if given the right budget. But then you can say that about most of Classic Who. Now for the second story, unfortunately there's not a lot of information on it, but the information on what was pitched sounds amazing. Okay, I want you to picture this. Sontarans, Rootans, London Blitz. If that alone doesn't get you excited for the story, I don't know what will. Being pitched by Mark Platt in 1981, who would go on to write Ghostlight and Lungbarrow, as well as several Big Finish productions and Doctor Who books. Again, unfortunately, the meetings about this script didn't get much further than these very basic story outlines, but the setting alone would have been incredible for that time. I would also have liked to have seen the Rutans get a first shake at the stick, because they have never been done right in the actual series, as they were shown to be very, very weak in Horror of Fang Rock. I can't imagine the effects would have been any better, to be honest. They probably would have looked about the same. But just to see that war on screen that we hear so much about would have been really nice. It's a less damaging thing than showing the Time War on screen. I feel like if you show the Time War on screen, the mystique of it's gone. If you show the Sontaran Rutan War, you're showing the reasons for these characters to exist, really. And I think that works. Now, would it have been executed very well? 83? Maybe, actually, because this was during a time when Doctor Who was getting a significant increase in viewership, especially around that 83 time because of the 20th anniversary. That entire season did massively well. The only downside of this is I feel if this was made, we probably wouldn't have got the two Doctors, or we wouldn't have had the Sontarans and the two Doctors, and although not a lot of people like that story, it is a personal nostalgia goldmine for me. Now, I've definitely saved the best for last here, as this episode not only lives on in memory, but has been adapted not once, but twice. If you haven't guessed it already, the story I'm looking at is Genesis of the Cybermen. Being submitted in 1981 by Jerry Davis, this episode was intended to be the Cybermen's origin story. Taking place on Mondas a couple of years before the Cybermen's creation, the Doctor and his companion Felicity were thrown straight into a conflict between two brothers who just happened to be the sons of the King of Mondas. Whilst the Doctor's companion would have met the nicer Prince Sylvan, he would have ventured into the TARDIS as the Doctor accidentally sent them a couple of years into the future, where Sylvan's brother Degger started converting humans into Cybermen. This is his idea to preserve his race and make them even better. But whilst this happened, he's become the king of Mondas, and now anybody who does not wish to be upgraded will be killed. This would have seen quite a scary element to the story, where Degger's wife would have been partially converted into a Cyberman, who would sadly die in between the conflict of these two brothers. The ending of this story would have seen a bunch of Mondasian rebels, including Sylvan, leave Mondas for Earth, actually, and this is what would have knocked Mondas into the deeper edges of space and out of orbit. Now, taking all of that in, this probably would have been a classic. Again, a lot of these stories are very hard to predict given the budgeting of the time and given the actors probably available at the time. For instance, how would this story have worked with Nyssa, Tegan and Adric? I think that would have been a bit clustered, so if you could get rid of them for a story, maybe this would have worked. I don't know how you'd have done that, maybe you explain they're trapped in the TARDIS or something. And even though this is probably the best sounding episode that I've mentioned, it got zero interest from the production team. Apparently, both John Nathan Turner and Anthony Root despised the idea and didn't want anything to do with it. Which is really interesting to me because not too long later they made Earthshock, which ended up being one of the most successful stories of the classic era. So maybe it's good that this story wasn't made because we probably would have never got Earthshock, and obviously we know that's a cult classic, that's amazing. But this would have been so interesting to see. If only there was a way we could experience it. Oh wait, there is! In 2002, Mark Platt penned an adaptation of this for Big Finish, which you'll probably know as Spare Parts. This story also featured the Fifth Doctor as originally intended, but also introduced Nyssa as the companion as opposed to this Felicity figure. Now personally, I imagine that the name of Felicity was pitched in this script and used in this story idea because they had no idea who the companions were going to be from series to series at that point. So this probably would have been a mistake that was rectified anyway had it been made. It was just how it was when it was pitched, you know? But wait, there's more. Not only did this story help out Big Finish, but it also helped the modern series of Doctor Who, as one of the versions of the Cyberman origins shown in World Enough for Time is directly inspired from this story. Quite a cool side note about this story is that Degger's head of security, Krail, is actually the original Cyberman that we get to hear speak in The 10th Planet. What an incredible bit of continuity that would have been. So, with all three of these stories, what do I think? Overall, pretty good. I think any of these stories would have fit right in that era and would have done very well. And in the case of Genesis of the Cybermen, it would have been an absolute bloody classic. The other concepts that we talked about here probably would have worked, but I don't think they would have been remembered as amazing episodes, you know? Especially Project Vita Sigma, I just don't think there was enough about it to be memorable, especially the fact no matter what you did, it's the first story about Tom Baker. It's not going to be remembered well, you know? If any of you are interested in listening to Spare Parts as an audio, I will link Big Finish's website in the description for you. But at that, I am going to end this video. I hope you've enjoyed and I hope you've learned something about Doctor Who. If your appetite for missing stories has grown during the course of this story, you will be very happy to know that I'm working on a similar video, but about Tom Baker's era. Nearly a decade in that TARDIS, you'd think he'd have a lot of scripts that never quite made it to screen, and you would be right. So yeah, if you like this video, be prepared for some more just like it. And please give a like, give a subscribe, go follow us wherever. I'll put all my social media links in the description. See you all soon. Goodbye.